the Markets at a Glance series. My name is Rufus Kamau, Markets Analyst at FX Better. So today we'll be having a very important session, and the focus is on trading the New York session, which starts right now. And of course, the stock market will be opening an hour later. So the New York session is always the most active session in the markets. So during this session, this is when you get to see volatility coming in at the highest rate, and this creates a lot of opportunities for traders. So once you join in, kindly say hi on the live comment section, and these will confirm that everything is working just fine. So hello Naomi, hello Lincoln, and thank you for joining this session. So I can already see a good question here, basically touch on the PMI. So I'll be trying to look at that. So as right now, I believe the most important asset to talk about in the markets is the market of gold traded against the US dollar, which is currently strongly bullish and gunning towards a new all-time high. So as you can see, if I start from a much higher time frame, you'll notice that over the last couple of years, we have had various highs. So we had this high here, and this was back in 2020, somewhere around 2049. Then in 2022, we had a similar high. Then 2023, a similar high, before we got this spike towards the end of last year. So towards the end of last year, this is when we had the highest price here, around 2140. I don't understand why we have a big spike here. So as you can see, the highest price we ever got was 2180. And now the market price has simply ride week over week. And this is the third straight week we are seeing a very strong bullish market in gold. So from the daily chart, you can see we have had a sequence of days where gold has been bullish. And then in the last 3, plus today makes it 4, we have seen a very strong acceleration of gold. And for today's price action, most of the momentum is happening right now. So you can see in the 15-minute chart, we have had 5 consecutive candlesticks where gold price is simply pushing higher. And there's one common thing we're experiencing here. So the key theme, seemingly, the gold price is ranging for a while, making a breakout, a pullback to retest the breakout area, and then a very strong rally during the New York session. So we get into the Asian session, the London session is all quiet, then eventually you get a breakout, and then a very strong rally before the market moves sideways. So the same pattern is happening today. Gold has been moving sideways, especially during the Asian, that is Sydney and Tokyo sessions. Then during the London session, there was a slight rally, and then the market pulled back. And now, as we enter the New York session, a very strong rally, and I expect this to extend to somewhere around 2140 to 2143 price level. So this is currently the most active asset in the market right now, and I don't believe we should be focusing on anything else today. So very strong bullish momentum currently at 2138, and we could be seeing some further upside. If you're late, then the upside potential is much lower. If you got this early, then you should be focusing somewhere between 2140 to 2143 before potentially the market takes a breather. So that being said, we'll be looking at other key things, and by this I mean things that are simply impacting the markets. Try to understand where they might be headed next before we look at the the economic calendar. So let's get things started. So hello, Lincoln. Thank you for joining the session. King Poon, Holyfield, as well as Quax. So I'll be starting with sharing the economic calendar, and then we'll go through it, see the key events for the day. And once we cover this, hopefully we get to understand the key events that are currently impacting the markets today. So let's start with the Forex Factory economic calendar. I'm hoping that everyone can see this. I'll try to zoom it so it's much clearer because it has a lot of data. So this is where we are today. So after getting the CPI data from Switzerland, which was a big spike of 0.6% in the month of February. Then today we have had a speech from Bank of Japan Governor Ueda. This did not have much impact on the news because he was speaking about the potential for CBDC, or what we basically describe as a central bank digital currency. So this did not much have impact. It did not talk about anything to do with Japanese monetary policy. So we have had a couple of services PMI coming in for the better part of the day. So the final services PMI for the Eurozone came in at 50.2, a slight improvement from the previous reading of 50.0 and very close to expectation. Whereas final services PMI 53.8, slightly below the projected 54.3 and below the previous reading of 54.3. But also remember, the key indication here is whether the index is above 50.0 or below. Above represents expansionary sector, below represents contractionary sector. So producer price index dropped by negative 0.9%. This is a good forward indicator of oncoming inflation data. So it's basically showing that inflation is moving in the right direction in the Eurozone. And this basically means that there is increased likelihood that the European Central Bank might consider cutting rates, though not in the next meeting, which is happening later this week. So the most important data for today is the ISM Services PMI, which is basically coming up at 6 p.m. So ISM is short for Institute of Supply Management, which basically conducts the survey. So it basically looks at various companies in the service sector across the US economy, and then collects data from them to try and understand the key trends happening in the services sector. So in the previous reading, there was an increase to 53.4, and now we're expecting the services sector to slow down to at least 53.0, but still above 50.0, which means that the service sector is still under expansionary level. So what investors will be looking for is an estimate of the strength of the US consumer, who is basically a key driver of stock performance in the US. So if services come in strong, then it basically means that the economy is very strong. And as a result, we expect to see continued bullish momentum in US equities. But then if you happen to see a weak services, then this could be negative for US equities. So as for the dollar index is really dependent on a couple of things later this week. And one of them is the speech by Fed Chair Jerome Powell, where he will be testifying tomorrow, and this will be on the House Financial Services Committee in Washington, D.C. at 6 p.m. So it's a semi-annual meeting or presentation that he makes to the U.S. legislature, and this takes 2 days. So on the first day, he goes to the House of Representatives, meeting the House Financial Services Committee. Then on the second day, he basically faces the Congress. So we can see on Thursday another speech by Fed Chair Jerome Powell, and in this case, he'll be presenting a similar report to the Senate Banking Committee. So these 2 meetings are very important because there will be a lot of House representatives as well as senators questioning Jerome Powell on monetary policy, his fight against inflation, and what he's looking to do with monetary policy. So in this case, it tends to be more impactful, mainly because he has to answer to these questions and present an accurate picture of where US monetary policy is headed. So that will determine the direction of the dollar index, and of course, all other dollar pairs. And as well, as we know, on Friday, we will be having the US non-farm payrolls. However, those are not the only key events for the week. We know that tomorrow we'll also be seeing the Bank of Canada make an interest rate decision where it's expected to hold interest rates level at 5%. So that will be a very important indicator, and it will determine the direction for Canadian dollar pairs. Whereas on Thursday, we have the euro main refinancing rate, or basically the European Central Bank making an interest rate decision, which is expected to be held stable at the current level of 4.5%. So if there's no change in interest rates for both of the central banks, then the focus is on the press conference that follows after. So after the Bank of Canada represents the data, then there will be a press conference at 6:30 p.m. And it's the same thing for ECB. So after it makes the interest rate decision at 4:15 p.m., then the ECB press conference will start at 4:45 p.m. So that's the key things we are seeing in the markets today. So other news include Wall Street hit by a tech slide, hawkish Fed speak, markets are up. So what we are seeing is US equities taking a step back, basically led by Tesla. So I'll be sharing this in just a moment. So this is the performance of US stocks as per yesterday. You can see the big tech stocks were most of them are going down, with Meta or Facebook being down 0.82%. Google was down 2.81%. Apple was down 2.54%. Amazon was down 0.36%, and the biggest fall in the top companies was Tesla, which was down 7.16%. So amid all this, Nvidia had a big rally of 3.6%, but then you can see there is indication of weakness in the US stock market. And as a result, that's why we saw the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq taking a step back yesterday. So that momentum has continued today, though later this afternoon, as we approach the New York session, we have seen these indices start to recover. So we'll be checking more on this shortly. So these are also more news. Stocks making biggest pre-market moves include Target, Apple, Tesla, MicroStrategy, and more. So Target Corporation was reporting earnings before market open today, and it made some strong rally after it presented some very strong earnings. So looking at the earnings from Target, the net sales were up 1.7% year over year, making 31.9 billion versus an estimated 31.38 billion. So gross profit margin for the company was 25.6%, up from 22.7% a year ago, and the estimate from market analysts was 25%. So clearly, the company beat net sales, beat gross profit margin, and diluted earnings per share was up 57.6% year over year to $2.98 versus estimates of $2.40. So this basically means that company beat earnings, beat revenues, and every other major estimate. So as a result, we have seen a big spike from the stock. So if you are to check Target stock, just highlight this quickly. So the company was up 0.073 yesterday. Don't mind the today here. This was yesterday. And today, after reporting the earnings, in pre-market trading, it moved higher 9.27%. So the closing price as per yesterday was $150.49. And today, as it opens, the market will be opening at a price of $164.44. And there's still more room for upside. So what this basically tells us as Forex trader is that the American consumer is very strong, and that's why companies like Target are beating earnings. So with a very strong American consumer, it also tends to be positive for US equity indices. So after the announcement of Target Corporation earnings a few minutes ago, we have seen the stock market indices start to make a U-turn, and hopefully we'll get to see some far more upside coming in from this. So let's look at the US equity indices and try to understand where they might be headed next. And hopefully we'll understand how to trade going forward. So we know we are expecting the ISM services PMI. A strong services might be really good for the market. I think we are seeing a very strong momentum in gold, a big spike all the way up, basically hitting a high of 21.41. So after hitting that level, we have seen a very strong rejection, and the market is now currently moving back downwards. So potentially, it means that there's a lot of people who had set their take profit around 21.40, 21.41, 21.42, and these may explain the pullback we are currently seeing in the markets. So with this in mind, I'm still bullish on gold. Gold doesn't just hit all-time highs and take a step back. Sometimes it will push that a little bit higher. So in this case, there's still more room for upside. So we just observe the price action and try to understand where the prices might be headed next. So on the US equity indices side, we'll start with the Nasdaq, which made a very strong rally on Friday last week. Then on Monday started moving downwards, and then today has been extremely bearish. So from the 15 minutes chart, this is what we are seeing. So when Target Corporation announced that it had made upbeat earnings, this is the pullback we got. So the market started to rally, but then there's still more weakness. So this weakness might be there until we have clarification from Jerome Powell on the direction of monetary policy. So potentially, if the monetary policy dictates that the Fed is going to cut interest rates early, then in that case, we might consider seeing the strong recovery from the Nasdaq and continuing momentum to form another yet all-time high. So for now, it seems like 18,000 is the key resistance. And remember, 18,000 was the resistance last month. So when the market was going up, it was unable to break the first, second, and that time, and eventually managed to break. So after breaking 18,000, there was a pullback. The market retested the area before making a strong rally upwards. So now that we are experiencing a pullback, it's more likely that the market will complete the journey, get to the 18,000 price level before we decide or we observe whether the price will be going down, whether it will be bouncing from here and move back upwards. So for now, it's more likely that the Nasdaq continues weakening and potentially gets to the 18,000 price level. So for the Dow Jones, it's kind of similar. So I'll try and clean this. So this is what we are seeing in the Dow. So a very strong bullish momentum, but then after we go to this high, we are seeing the market pulling back downwards. So we have seen this decline, the market attempting to go up, and now what we are seeing is a break of a trend line that has held for the last 4 days. So we can all agree that this has been the predominant trend line, working as support for the last 4 days. And of course, if you are to think of the resistances, they would follow a path somewhere along here. So what we have seen is the market attempting to break, pulling back, and now forming the actual break. So here we have a breakout, which basically implies that the price may now be headed much lower. And one of the immediate short-term targets is the bottom of this pattern. So 38,737 is an interesting price level for the Dow Jones short sellers. So we might experience the market making a big drop and eventually getting to this area before we see the next side of momentum. For the S&P 500, it's a similar thing. We have been seeing the market moving downwards after hitting that all-time high. So remember, 5,000 was our price level, and now the market is headed back there. So we have a key level here, which was acting as a resistance here. We'll try to connect it, this high with this other high here, and now the market is retesting that area. Then from the forward chart, you can see that there's still more areas here that were acting as resistance and then later as support. And this is 5,047, somewhere around 5,050. So 5,050 seems to be our price level. So if the S&P 500 manages to break this area, then the drop might be consistent and drop to that area here, where it will still be within the bullish trend line momentum that we've been experiencing along this line here. So this has been the momentum, and if the market is bouncing from the upper trend line and moving back downwards, then the obvious target is around 5,050. So now we observe the price action around this trend line to see if there's a potential breakout. So in the New York session, we are seeing momentum coming in. For instance, if you see the deceleration here, it is a slight drop during the early Asian and London session, but now as we get into New York, you can see the candlesticks are getting bigger. So there is a likelihood we will continue seeing this drop or momentum continuing in the market. So today I didn't have much. I think that's a pretty good coverage. And the last thing I'll be checking is on gold. So we are seeing a very strong rejection, perhaps maybe even a reversal. So I don't know what will happen, but the big spike is quite considerable. It's not every day that you see this kind of spike in gold and then it moves back downwards. So if you are to estimate from the high we have seen all the way back down, this is about 1600 points. So it seriously marks some form of reversal, and the momentum seems to be only increasing by the minute. So it's better to be patient, look at the 1 hour candlestick, and then wait for the next 9 minutes when the candlestick closes, then make a decision based on how that market closes. So the market has already seen an all-time high, so maybe perhaps out of take profits have been triggered and the market is making a reversal, or it's just the volatility and the market gets back up here. So it really depends on what now happens in the next couple of minutes to see if there's an all-out reversal or whether the market will move back to retest this high that we have just seen in a couple of minutes. So as per now, it seems extremely bearish with the momentum we have seen in 50 minutes candlesticks. So it's not every day you see two candlesticks spanning size of about 1800 points, almost 2000. It could be seeing 2000 in the next few minutes. So if there's anything you should be thinking about in terms of a volatile asset that could either reward you or break your account, then that should be gold for today. So as for the questions you guys have, let's see what you have. So PMI, we already touched on that. A big if, you are the current CBK governor, would you store your country's reserves in Bitcoin? Yes, I would. Not because of the price action, but rather because of the long-term view, where Bitcoin has been more stable in terms of storing value compared to other assets. So the ECB is anticipated to try and share the question. So the ECB is anticipated to cut much earlier than the Fed. If such do happen, would that strengthen still the dollar further, since investors would be running to the dollar? Yes, absolutely. So if inflation target, which is 2% for both central bank, is achieved in the Eurozone first, and the European Central Bank decides to go for rate cuts, then it means that it creates a carry trade or an even better opportunity for both bond traders to go for more positions. So as a result, what you would experience in that scenario is basically the euro starting to weaken, and now that would be tradable with stronger currencies. So with currencies that are issuing or the currencies that have set interest rates at 5% and above, they would make a good killing against the euro. So in that case, the bearish trade on euro USD would be a much better bet. So explain the oil price action. I don't know what's happening with oil. I honestly don't know. So I just checked a couple of minutes ago before I opened the session. I was more focused on gold. So what we are seeing in the oil markets is an extreme bearish momentum. So we had already broken out here, and the market rallied all the way up to around $84.1 per barrel before moving back and getting back into the pattern, which is a range. And now it's good to assume that the operating dynamics are back towards this range. So as per now, it seems like the extension was only mapped to hit the previous high here. And once the market got to that previous high, then we got a very strong rejection, and the market is now making steps backwards. So the target now becomes $80.363. So I believe it's more centered around US oil production. So I haven't checked that out. So hopefully, guys, you'll be able to check on the inner news from the IEA to see the level of US oil production and how it may have impacted the strong bearish momentum. So there's still more room for downside. Key areas to observe might include these lows here. These are the most recent lows, and the market has already tested here and bounced strongly. So I would be very patient to see how the next candlestick crosses, to see if there's a bounce and a move back upwards, or whether it will be breaking this area and moving down to $80.363 per barrel. So thank you very much, guys. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you, and I hope to see you on the next session.